All right, guys, today's topic might be a little bit controversial and it might strike some chords for some of you, but it's something that needs to be talked about. We are going to dive into whether we should be drinking alcohol while we are trying to conceive. We're also going to touch on tobacco and marijuana. So if those are things that you partake in, listen in. Today's episode is for you. God designed your body for fertility, but when the journey to parenthood feels like a heartbreaking mystery, it's so easy to feel lost. I'm Dr. Trisha, a nurse practitioner and fertility consultant who's been where you are. That's why I created Fertility by Design, where faith meets science to empower you with real solutions, holistic healing, and biblical encouragement. You are not alone. Your fertility is not broken. So let's walk this journey together. When you're trying to conceive, sometimes every sip of an alcoholic beverage feels loaded. Should we be giving it up completely? Can you continue as usual with your nightly glass of wine? Or do you need to feel pressuring guilt with every single sip you choose to take? We are going to dive into all of that today. Welcome back, guys, to Fertility by Design. I'm so excited to dive into this topic today because I feel like it's something that doesn't get talked about enough, or there's very generic recommendations around, which I totally understand why. It's because the data is not super clear on what is and what isn't safe when it comes to alcohol consumption while trying to conceive. So we are going to talk a little bit about the research. We're going to talk about how to live our life in balance without putting our entire life on pause. And then we're also going to cover things like marijuana and tobacco that I often see. Sorry, husbands, it's often you guys that I see consuming those things without changing that pattern while your spouse is doing all the things to help improve their fertility. And oftentimes I see the husband still using tobacco. So we're going to talk about all of that. So buckle up. Let's go. There can be so much tension when it comes to should we drink alcohol, should we not? And then when you choose to in the moments that you do, there can be intense guilt that comes after it. Every month you get another negative. You think, well, maybe it was the alcohol that I had. And there can be so many vicious cycles around those thoughts that are causing our cortisol to spike and then causing other issues that are actually worse than if you would have just had a drink and not felt the guilt. So I've had so many clients asking me, is it okay to have a glass of wine on my birthday? Or my friends are coming in from out of town. Is it okay if I have a drink this weekend? I haven't had one in 9 months. And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. And that is not going to be the one reason you don't get pregnant this cycle. The guilt over the choice that you feel is probably more harmful than the drink itself, because you are having a stress response just because you want to have 1 or 2 drinks with your friends on a special occasion. It's just like food, making those choices we talked about in a previous episode. We want to make those choices intentional. We don't want them to be on the fly. The same goes for our alcohol consumption. So here's what we know from the research, though. We know that low to even moderate drinking, which is considered up to 2 drinks per day, has been associated with decreased fertility in men and women. Okay. Now, 2 drinks a day to me is not really like low to moderate drinking. If you're having 2 drinks a day, even 5 days a week, you can actually still go through alcohol withdrawal. If you are a daily alcohol drinker, even just 1 drink a night, it has been shown that you can go through withdrawal. A couple of drinks a week has been shown to potentially not have any effect in a couple studies, but that was like 2 to 3 per week. So we need to take all of that into consideration. The Mayo Clinic recommends there is no safe amount to be able to consume during the trying to conceive window, and they recommend abstaining completely from alcohol. Now, we have to abstain from alcohol for 9 months if we're pregnant anyway, right? But what I'm trying to get here is that while we don't know what the safe amount is, and the research does differ, we do know that if you have a drink here and there for a special occasion, an event, things like that, you are not going to doom your chances of conceiving. That's not going to do it. Okay, common sense tells us that. But you have to be self-aware. Are you drinking every night and trying to say that that's not going to affect your fertility? Because that may not be true. Does your spouse drink regularly while you guys are trying to conceive? Heavier consumption, like we were saying, every single day is known to dramatically affect sperm quality. And the research has recently shown that the effects of that alcohol, even once abstinence began, it can last up to 30 days during the withdrawal period from the alcohol. So originally it was thought that once drinking ceases, the effects of the alcohol ceased very quickly afterwards. But actually we have found that up to 30 days it can still be affecting. And so that sperm turnover of building the healthier sperm may even take longer than we initially thought. So that is really important, especially if you have a spouse who has continued to drink, but you have stopped. Takes two to tango. Get him on board too. If you need someone to tell him so that you're not the nagger, you send him to me. I'll let him know. Okay. Or just send him this episode and now he'll hear me say that. So the guilt is not on you, but it really is a team effort when it comes to trying to conceive. So it's not okay if you have given up these things and your spouse has not, because it's just as important for them with their sperm quality to limit things like alcohol, especially when it comes to nicotine, tobacco, vaping, marijuana. Those are all very highly studied substances that are known to affect fertility. Smokers have a 54% more likelihood of experiencing delayed pregnancy. It is tied to low sperm quality, miscarriage, reduces IVF success. Vaping has been linked to lower AMH levels in women. Marijuana doubles the risk of ovulation-related infertility in females. And THC and tobacco also affect sperm quality and DNA integrity, which is very important when we are struggling to conceive. We need to address these things head on and have these hard conversations with our spouse, with our doctors, of how we can decrease the use of these substances to be able to hopefully have a healthy pregnancy. If we're struggling to conceive for a certain amount of time, 6 months, a year, and it hasn't happened, it is time to look at your lifestyle and see what needs to change. And unfortunately, some people will get pregnant doing all of these things. That's how it is. It happens. But is that baby then as healthy as the baby could be? Or is this why we see preeclampsia and issues with the placenta and gestational diabetes and all these things? So food for thought. A lot of those things are connected to the male. Research has been showing that the placental development relies a lot on the health of the male. And we're seeing a lot of these things like preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, intrauterine growth restriction, and they are tied back to the male. So it really does matter. Even if someone is getting pregnant while doing these things, they end up maybe having these complications that they wouldn't have had otherwise that can affect the baby and the mother. So let's go back to alcohol again. When you're fully trying to avoid something, especially when it comes to alcohol, just because it can be such a social thing, and I'm not saying that we can't have fun without alcohol or that we need alcohol in all these social events, but I understand and I empathize that sometimes you just want to go out with your friends and have a drink. And if you are feeling like on your trying to conceive journey, you can't do that, you can't enjoy a drink here and there, it can really trigger isolation and shame and maybe even avoidance of those events and situations where maybe you would normally go and have fun. And don't forget about vitamin J. We need joy in our lives. So if we're isolating ourselves from things that we used to do that brought us joy, then that's not a good thing, right? So in that instance, the glass of wine or the cocktail would be a much better option than isolating and feeling sad about not being able to participate in events anymore because you don't want to answer questions. You don't want to tell anybody maybe why you're not drinking. You just don't want to open that can of worms. And so you start avoiding these events. And that's going to be a lot more harmful than just having the drink, okay? Getting real over here. So it's really mindful moderation. Are you coming home from work every night and unwinding with a glass of wine? That's different because that's a coping mechanism and it's not a great coping mechanism. So we need to figure out why you're coming home and having that glass of wine, and what can we replace it with that is a good, healthy coping mechanism to be able to still manage that stress in an effective way versus a toxic way. One of the biggest things I see with alcohol consumption isn't even always necessarily the alcohol itself, but the carrier of the alcohol. When it comes to having and making the choice to have a beverage, especially in the summer, a lot of times it comes in the form of a fruity cocktail, maybe with a little umbrella in it. The problem with that is a lot of those drinks are just sugar bombs. So especially if we're consuming them on an empty stomach, we really need to be mindful of the sugar consumption that we're having, because we don't want to bomb ourselves with sugar, have our insulin having to pump out extra, and then we're contributing further to insulin resistance. So choosing some low sugar options would be a really good idea if you are going to consume beverages. Also, having a balanced meal prior to drinking the beverage would be an awesome idea. Things like just tequila and some soda water and lime, or even just regular water with lime for my hardcore girlies out there. Maybe opting for a skinny version, or opting for margaritas or drinks that aren't using pre-mixed solutions. They are actually just like fresh juice, bubbly sodas, things like that. Just things that keep the sugar content low versus those pre-mixers that tend to be pumped with a lot of sugar and processed products. So hopefully this episode has brought some real conversations to the table about alcohol and other substance use between you and your spouse. Hopefully you can walk into having a beverage in a social situation and not feel any guilt about it, and know that you are not derailing your fertility journey. But also hopefully you can bring balance in and know that you don't need to be perfect, but we do need to make progress. So your fertility season really does deserve this stewardship, not guilt. Choosing those habits intentionally to support your goal and really enjoy all of life's moments in the process is really what we're looking for. If this episode has given you clarity and encouragement, then I encourage you to come on over and join us in our Faith and Fertility Circle. We are talking about all kinds of different topics monthly on our group calls, answering your questions, doing monthly meal plans, and just keeping accountability, because this journey alone is not it. You are meant to be in community with other people on this journey. So come on in, we'll get a strategy going for whatever season you're in, and we're excited to have you. So let's raise a glass to intentional living, gracious stewardship of our body, and hope-filled steps toward the miracle that God is crafting in His time. I hope you all have a blessed week, and we'll see you next week. That's it for today's episode of Fertility by Design. Subscribe so you never miss an episode, leave a review to help more couples find hope, and share this with a friend who needs encouragement on their fertility journey. Need even more support? Let's connect. Find me on Instagram at Trisha Zehrung for faith-filled fertility guidance, real solutions, and a community that just understands. Remember, your fertility is not broken. Your body is beautifully and wonderfully designed, and God's plan is always perfect. I'll see you next time.